I'm going to show you some tweets from some left media today, some real independent journalists like Abby Martin and Max Blumenthal, Ben Norton, and people like that, and a little clip from Jimmy Dore about this particular one. And what I'm going to share with you is, firstly, Bernie Sanders' tweet about Venezuela. Sadly, Bernie Sanders has taken the position of Elliott Abrams, who is the war criminal that has been part of overturning governments and death squads and genocidal activities. And you've seen probably him in an exchange with Ilhan Omar in the Foreign Affairs Senate Committee. He talks about, his being part of the war crime at El Zamotti, I think it is. Bernie Sanders' tweet is very unfortunate, and yet it's sort of not surprising because he's been sort of an imperialist for a long time. And as Jimmy Dore says, he's made this, and Chris Hedges has said it a long time ago. Chris Hedges, the Pulitzer Prize recipient, has said a long time ago that Bernie Sanders made a Faustian deal with the Democratic Party.
Does his advisors really not know this? Or is this the Faustian bargain they've made for Bernie being able to talk about the minimum wage and Medicare for all? That's what Chris Hedges says, that this is a Faustian bargain that Bernie has made, that he can now talk about domestic policy, but he has to go along with the CIA talking points on foreign policy, and that's what this is. And he has to refrain from violence against protesters. The people who are violent in Venezuela are the protesters, the opposition. They're the ones attacking people who wanted to vote. And you know how I know that? From reporters who actually went there. Reporters who actually went there, not from John Bolton and Elliott Abrams. And here's what Roger Waters tweeted out underneath. It's the first tweet underneath Bernie's tweet. Bernie, are you effing kidding me? If you buy the Trump, Bolton, Abrams, Rubio line, humanitarian intervention, and collude in the destruction of Venezuela, you cannot be a credible candidate for president of the United States. Or maybe you can. Maybe you're the perfect stooge for the 1%. But I'm going to support Tulsi because she normally doesn't do this shit, although she just repeated the stuff about Assad and stuff on The View, but at least she stood up to them. This is bad. This is as good as we can get. It's so sad. It's so sad. You're going along with the bullshit from the Trumpers, and you know that this is like, you don't know that this was they're the most oil-rich country in the world, and it is. They just happen to have a bad government that is not nice to the people. Jesus Christ, Bernie. So this is super disappointing. If it comes down to Bernie and Tulsi as his running mate, that maybe she could fix some of the stuff. I don't know. It's weird. Again, it's just weird. People will say, well, Bernie's not up on foreign policy. If I know it in my garage, then that fucking guy knows it. If I know it in my garage, then if a nightclub comedian knows it, and if I can see through this. And the reason why this is bad is because you'll notice a lot. I was reading that guy, Jonathan Chait, if that's how you say his name, Chait, writes for the New York Times, and he was a big guy he was pro-Iraq war invasion. And in 2011 or 12, he wrote his mea culpa about it, saying he's admitting he was 100% wrong now. But he said the reason why I thought it was good to go along with the invasion of Iraq was because I bought into this security state. I bought into the intelligence community's assessment that Saddam Hussein was a horrible dictator and oppressing his people. So that's why I thought, even if there was, it would be okay to go in and do this. So that's what this does. This helps manufacture consent for an invasion. This helps manufacture consent for us funding a civil war like Elliot Abrams is doing right now. That's manufacturing consent of the security state. That's what Bernie's doing. And he's not strong enough on this stuff, and he doesn't stand up, and that's bullshit because he knows better. Why is it bullshit? Because he knows better. You're telling me Bernie doesn't fucking know better than this? He's just as dumb as every newscaster in America? That's why that's horrible. Fucking Roger Waters knows the difference. Every actual progressive knows the difference. And that bullshit that people have to say, oh, he's a bad guy. Isn't it amazing every country you want to invade, they just happen to be a bad guy? Every country that's oil rich, they happen to be ruled by a bad guy. Isn't that weird? That every country that has a lot of oil that we want to get our corporate hands on, or has a country that we want to put a pipeline through, somehow they always have an oppressive dictator government. Isn't that weird? Saddam Hussein was a bad guy who oppressed his own people. He gassed his own people. The gas we sold him. Muammar Gaddafi's a bad guy. He oppressed his own people, even though he had the best country in Africa and actually took care of their people. Oh, Assad's a bad guy. He gassed his own people, and we got blah, blah, blah. Now Maduro's a bad guy. He oppresses his own people. So you don't ever get tired of this? You never get tired of repeating CIA talking points? Do you realize that they have to put out that narrative first before they go and invade, before they do what they do? They have to first do this. This is the first part of it. And then when you repeat this, you're doing the bidding of the CIA. I know a lot of people say, well, I'm glad Bernie says this because then I can take him seriously when he says we shouldn't invade. No, when he does this, this manufactures consent for invasion. That's why that's bad. Even if he finally concludes that we shouldn't. What you're doing is manufacturing consent because you're saying, yes, the security state, our intelligence community, John Bolton and Elliot Abrams are telling you the truth. There really is a crisis. We really need it. The crisis is caused by us and our economic sanctions on the country, along with Saudi Arabia overproducing oil to drive the price of oil down to $28 a barrel, so we can say there is a humanitarian crisis, so we can then do our invasion. Do you see how you're going along with it when you do this? This isn't a fucking Rubik's Cube. This happens every time. Every time it happens like this. This isn't new. I can see it. Ron can see it. Steph can see it. Fucking comedians see through you. That's why this is bullshit. You gotta stop the foreign wars, Bernie. You gotta tell the truth about them. Tell the fucking truth. And if you don't know this is bullshit, fucking shame on you and your staff. And it's too bad. It's too bad that this is the best we can get. That is just too bad. That this is the best. That's too bad. This is the best we can get. That's sad. All right. So now tell me where I'm wrong about this. Am I wrong about anything?
I think we should end it there.
Okay, let's end it there.
That's it. Yeah.
Oh, motherfucker.
In this case, he's obviously made some sort of a deal that he will support the warmongering Democratic Party in their foreign policy, whatever they decide, and but and they'll let him go on about Medicare for all and all that kind of thing. And the irony is, of course, that then you get Bernie Sanders supporters then coming on and saying, oh, he didn't really mean the US in that, he was talking about other countries. Well, no, I'm sorry, he was actually approving of the plan of Elliot Abrams, and to deliver aid, in quotes, to Venezuela. And the aid, usually in the past, it's when Elliot Abrams delivers aid, it usually contains weapons that arm the opposition so that governments can be overthrown. That's what that means. And by the way, Maduro has received aid, real aid, from Europe, and he's quite happy to take and welcomes aid from Europe, but he does not welcome aid from USAID because it's likely to be weapons. And he's not being paranoid. That's actually something that has happened in the past. The point man, Elliot Abrams, is a war criminal, and he is more than likely to do that. And there's violence. They're trying to cause violence. Guaido and the opposition Guaido and the opposition are trying to cause violence on the borders so as to invite the US to militarily intervene. And now they're openly calling for that. I'm sorry, I'm hearing some sort of cow in the distance, and it's sort of rather strange screamy sound, and that's very odd. Anyway, so if I seem a little bit disturbed, seem a little bit distracted, that's why. I'll have to find out what's going on there. Being vegan, it's difficult living around animal agriculture. But anyway, so there's been, these attempts by the opposition, and probably, I'm sure that the CIA is embedded there somewhere, because that's what they do. They're creating this situation which it's intended to manufacture consent for a military invasion. So by the United States. So that's what, and this is all for oil. And, John Bolton has actually admitted that. They're open about it. They're very open about that. It's all very sad. But Bernie Sanders, people are already making excuses for him. And I find that sort of really, it's not surprising, but then again it is. It's like, there doesn't seem to be any line too dear to cross. People, when it comes, for some people who call themselves progressive, with Bernie Sanders, it's like, the anti-Russian propaganda wasn't a line too dear to cross. The signing a letter to the UN, asking them not to pick on Israel, basically. Bernie Sanders has signed other imperialist bills. He's been for regime change in different countries. So this is what he does. That's what he is. He's an imperialist at heart, and he's also all over the place on Palestinian rights. Sometimes he's promoting them, and other times he's not. It's and this is the thing, I agree with Roger Waters. Roger Waters is telling it really like it is. If Bernie Sanders doesn't realize that what's happening, then with this Venezuelan situation, which is probably one of the clearest so far of all the various overthrowings of attempted to overthrow democratically elected governments, and there's been dozens since 1946. If Bernie Sanders doesn't understand that by now, and he doesn't recognize that any time the US attempts to go in to deliver humanitarian assistance, in quotes, or humanitarian aid, in quotes, and get somebody like Elliott Abrams to do it too, on top of that. If he doesn't recognize that by now, that there's something that should have red flags all over it, that should have alarm bells going off. If he hasn't gotten that in the many decades that he's been in the US Congress or whatever, then there's something very lacking in him. And I don't believe that could be the case. I do not believe that could be the case, because he's very, very smart. He is smart. He's quite wise to what's going on. So, and he had a whole bunch of people including myself, on his Twitter feed having a go at him for that, for promoting another intervention into a country, a democratically elected country, under false pretenses, and under a situation where the U.S. has got crippling economic sanctions on Venezuela, and has actually helped create most of this situation that's happening right now. Instead, he should have been saying the U.S. needs to lift those crippling economic sanctions, and the Western allies need to give back Venezuela the billions and billions of dollars of gold that they're withholding from Maduro and the Venezuelan government. No, he doesn't say that. He suggests what Elliott Abrams is suggesting. So it's incredibly unfortunate. And if he doesn't realize what's going on, then, like Roger Waters said, he probably should not be president. And that he is a stooge for the 1% if he doesn't know. And if he does know, which I would hazard a guess, I think I could take a bet on it that I'm not a gambling person, but I could take a bet on it that he does know what's going on, and he's only saying that because he's done a deal with the Democratic Party. Then you can make up your mind about that sort of the ethics of that person. These people are supposed to be leaders, in quotes. I get so tired of people who call themselves progressive just ignoring these imperialist things that this is not small potatoes. These sort of things, the manufacturing consent, the leading people astray, like people like Bernie Sanders leading people astray, people like Ocasio-Cortez just ignoring the whole thing and just sort of not saying anything, and that's a complicity in itself. Those sort of things, but this is not a small thing. This is an invasion, an attempted invasion of a country where people have already now been killed, and there will be a lot of bloodshed because Elliot Abrams has no problem with death squads or anything like that. He oversaw a massacre, an 800 people massacre, that El Mazzotti massacre. Children. There was children there, raping children. So, if these people that are politicians and they let this go, they're complicit in the destruction of a country, a destruction of a country that is trying to be a socialist country, and they're okay with that, basically. They're okay with the killing of civilians for oil. And this is, this is a reflection on the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party, a warmongering, corporate-loving party. They will never be any different. That party needs to be dismantled. And Bernie Sanders, I'm so tired of his quote-unquote sheepdogging for the Democratic Party and doing their bidding on foreign policy and stuff, and the back and forth about Palestine and Israel and stuff. It's so tiring. And it makes me sad because, there's people, they're always looking for a leader in that country, instead of really just focusing on a nonviolent grassroots movement. A yellow vest movement actually is what is needed at this point, because this is the sort of nonsense. Even the bar is so low, for leaders. I mean, when people start going on like that over here, which they do, politicians, I'm not going to vote for them. But see, and we have a ranked choice voting, a preferential system. But there are people can vote for the Greens or whatever, but they don't have to vote for people who are supporting imperialist interventions which are destroying countries. And I just refuse to vote for people who show their ethics are very, very malleable, that they change depending on their audience and stuff. That's just not okay. If you can't trust people at their word and they're going back and forth, then really they're not leaders and they're not people that you should be supporting. But people they'll go on, people will go, oh, nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. It's more than that. When people are responsible when politicians are complicit by promoting the propaganda line about a country. Bernie Sanders has also said Maduro is a dictator and the elections weren't transparent. That is a lie. And he knows that's a lie. The Carter Institute said that those Venezuelan elections recently are the best that they've ever seen in the world. So, and Maduro, from people that have been there for decades and have been watching this situation, does not behave like a dictator. And Chavez was not a dictator, and I think Bernie Sanders called him a dictator too. You know, this is no good. I mean, this is like, and Ro Khanna, by the way, Congressman Ro Khanna, or I think he's a congressman, isn't he? He said something really smearing about Maduro too, before he then said we shouldn't intervene. Why does something like that, why does that have to be prefaced by a smear of another government simply because they're not a US government or a Western ally? Seriously, why do people have to do that? You see, this is the sort of, this is, you know, I don't think that's okay too. I don't trust people that do that kind of thing. And Ro Khanna did that. I don't trust that. What else is he going to say? That's just vilifying for the sake of it, because it's something that they all do. They all do it, pretty much. And they've slapped Representative Ilhan Omar on the knuckles over her just simply stating a fact that AIPAC, you know, funds various or gives donations to Congress people and gives them free holidays and stuff. It's an influential lobbyist group. You can watch that Electronic Intifada. The Electronic Intifada has on their website The Lobby, which is a documentary, an undercover investigation of how AIPAC functions, how the Israel lobby functions. It's actually a fact, what she said. And they cracked her on the knuckles about that and put her in her place. Even Ocasio-Cortez patronized her and said, oh, I'm glad that she's learning, you know, and has sort of, you know, I mean, it's terrible. It's ugly to watch. It makes my stomach turn watching this. And we have politicians like that here in Australia too. It's awful. And I will not vote for people like that. No, people who go on like that, people who throw Palestinians under the bus, that is appalling. If anybody has any idea what Palestinians are going through and have done for decades, any politician that throws Palestinians under the bus, they either are completely clueless and shouldn't be in office, or they are just, it's just disgusting, basically. Anyway, that's really all I wanted to say. I just wanted to show you I'm glad it was righteous outrage about what Bernie Sanders said, and you should keep that in mind. That's all I'm going to say. Keep that in mind, because that gives you a little insight into how he functions, depending on how the wind blows. I've been saying this for a while now, at least 2 or 3 years now, about him. And Manar Muhuesh, who's from the editor-in-chief of Mint Press News, you should join that publication if you can, online. They're on Facebook and on Twitter, and they do great work. And she says she's been saying that about him for years. You know, and he's just really outed himself once again. I mean, the anti-Russian propaganda is leading to a nuclear arms race with Putin and Russia, and it could end up in a nuclear Armageddon where it's all over for us. That is, and Bernie Sanders promotes anti-Russian propaganda, and he's even made videos about it. You know, videos about and vilifying Russia. This is not okay. It is not okay, because people are going to suffer, and now we're in a full-on nuclear arms race. And Putin is taking it seriously, and so he should, because the US has been withdrawing from treaties that they shouldn't be. The INF treaty, they're the ones that are actually doing all the outrageous things, and Russia is just trying to have parity so that the US doesn't bomb them. And now they've started this Space Force, because now they realize that Russia has the capability now of easily sending a nuclear weapon without detection, without being able to stop it, to Washington, and they're freaking out. So now they've got this Space Force, which they're going to try and, they're going to try and bomb Russia from space. That's really, I think, a lot of why they're doing that, the space thing, of course. And also, I mean, because if you can basically bomb from space, nobody can really stop you. I don't think. There's probably ways of stopping or intercepting missiles, but I mean, it makes it very easy to just go above Russia or in space and just send a nuclear weapon down, and that's it. You could send a whole bunch of limited nuclear weapons down and knock off the various targets, and, as the saying goes, Bob's your uncle. I mean, I don't know what that saying means, but, so, this is that is part of the whole idea of the Space Force, this stupid Space Force that Trump's talking about. And of course, everybody else will have to do the same, you see, because if they're going to do it, other countries are going to have to do it, because they're not stupid, they know what that's about. So, there'll be so many weapons where somebody's likely to have an accident and it'll be over anyway. There was almost an accident except for a submarine, excuse me, a Russian submarine officer, I think. I can't remember his name. But he prevented a whole, during that, I think it was the Cuban Missile Crisis, he prevented a nuclear launch. He decided he refused to launch, and it was, I think it was a false alarm, but he refused to launch it. He could, if he hadn't done that, it could have been all over for us then. There's accidents all the time. We just don't hear about it. That's a very close accident, but there's actually accidents where we just don't hear about. We only hear about it decades later. Look into how many almost launched things that have happened, or accidents, and these are the ones that happen to get out. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. So it's not okay. Anti-Russian propaganda and all of that is disastrous, and any politician who is promoting regime change, who is promoting anti-Russian propaganda, who is silent on Israel, or who is promoting a Israel state or whatever, any of that, and that, like people like Tim Canova, who knows all about. People like to make excuses for Tim Canova. He's not a politician yet. I mean, sorry, he is a politician, but he's not elected. But he was great on different things like Medicare for all and all of that, but he was awful on the Palestinian issue, and he saw, I know for a fact, he saw all the documentaries that Avi Martin from Empire Files had made, because I sent them to him. We just sent him the programs, but he just wouldn't shift, and he's quite open about his support for Israel. And he knows all about all the awfulness going on there, and he still thinks that there should be a state of Israel. That was the understanding I got. So anyway, that's really problematic. Anyhow, please click the like button if you like this content. Please leave comments. I always enjoy comments. And please subscribe and hit the notifications bell, otherwise you don't receive any updates. And thanks so much for watching. Peace.